Hi everyone, I'm very pleased to be here and to lead the SIT session, so Sterile Insect Technique. Very pleased also because it's not always recognized as a biocontrol solution, but it is. So I will start with an overview of the basic principle. How does it work? So with SIT, we target one pest in particular. We master that pest in a mastering facility. Then we separate males and females. So basically, we want to keep the males, sterilize them. For that, we use X-ray. And those males are then released on the field massively. The objective is to saturate the environment with all sterile males so that they will be the one mating with the wild females, transferring a sterile sperm, and the females will keep laying eggs, but less, and sterile eggs. The eggs will not hatch. So we can also compare it to a kind of contraception at a large scale. So among the benefits of this solution is that we have a specific control of a pest. We have no resistance because we are only playing on the reduction of the reproduction. The immediate impact in agriculture is a reduction of crop damage. When we target insects that are vectors of diseases, the immediate effect is a reduction of the disease that can be transmitted by those insects. There are lots of also ecological and health benefits, and also because thanks to this technique, we can use less pesticide against that pest. This is also compatible with lots of biocontrol tools, so it's really adapted and has to be integrated within an integrated strategy. And the use of SIT on a large scale also brings a cooperative action and raising awareness among the different stakeholders and the public. The public can be the consumers of fruits, but also residents in the area where SIT is deployed. And I think the three speakers that we'll have later will also show you what kind of cooperative action we can look at. So as an example, so Cara Nelson, ex-CEO of the Auxiliary program in Canada, was supposed to be here with me, but she couldn't come in the end. She would have presented you the huge impact that SIT could bring in Canada for the suppression of codling moth, so a pest of apple. So the program in Canada is functional since the 90s on now 2,900 hectares. It has led to a reduction of fruit damages, and now they only have about 0.2% of fruit damages over the whole valley. 94% pest reduction, 96% reduction of pesticide use. So that's a huge impact that has also led to improve the relationship between urbans and rurals. And on the economical side, it's of course opening new markets because it is known that growers from this area have a production that is exempt from the pest. The cost benefits analysis showed a ratio of 1 per 2.5, so quite interesting. Developing SIT, though, requires having a mastering facility. So they are of different sizes, but among the top ones, we can see the El Pino facility in Guatemala is the largest one, producing 2,500 million flies per week. Mexico, second one, 1,000 million per week. So the picture is from the new facility in Mexico. So the objective of use for SIT can be four. So it is mostly used for suppression, which is reducing the pest population under an economical threshold, or if we think of mosquitoes, that's going to be a health risk threshold. It can also be used as a prevention, so avoid the invasion of a new pest, containment, stop the invasion at the door, or eradication. And all of these strategies will imply different stakeholders, different benefits, and different business models. I will just give a few examples, like the key examples for SIT. So the first big development of SIT was done on screwworm in North and Central America. They started in the 50s and started in the Caribbean. They could eradicate screwworm population from all the south of US, and as you can see, going down progressively until Panama. So that shows that the deployment of SIT is area-wide, can be progressive, and what is said is that it's like a rolling carpet. Like you protect an area, and then you continue and continue. So now all the gray areas are exempt of screwworm. Screwworm is a terrible pest targeting cattle, and that was creating enormous damage and economical damage. And now there's a continuous release of sterile flies in Panama to block the reinvasion from the Southern America. And the estimated benefits of this approach is 1.5 billion. Another example, this time of containment. So that's what's being done in Mexico and Guatemala. So they are releasing to stop to avoid the arrival of the flies, fruit flies, in that area. The economical return estimated is $112 for $1 spent. Another example is prevention. So in California, they've estimated that the cost of having an outbreak of Terratis capitata, the medfly, would be, it was estimated at almost 2,000 million per year. That's the estimation for the cost of having to treat an outbreak, the impact on the market, etc. The cost of the preventive action, which is shared between different institutional authorities, is 17 million per year. So there's an enormous cost benefit. So these are only a few examples. Now, I wanted to show you the diversity of the programs, and I've listed on the left all the programs that have an governmental involvement, which can be national or regional. And I'm not saying that there are governmental programs, because there's a diversity of models behind those. So you can see, I've only listed the countries. Some countries have more than one program and facility, and many countries are using SIT on different species in the same facility. Most of them are in agriculture against plant pests. There are a few private or public-private partnership programs, and some emerging programs. In Europe and Israel, there are new emerging programs with a private model. And also, as you can see, most of the emerging programs are also developing on mosquitoes, because there's a real issue with mosquito-transmitting diseases. This is not an exhaustive list, and also there are more than 14 pest species for which that are controlled, efficiently controlled and large scale by SIT. There are about 12 species for which SIT is on the way to upscaling. So proof of concept has been done, and now there's a need to be able to upscale it, and about 14 that are on the R&D phase. So SIT is being developed. So the particularities to keep in mind for when you build the model, business model for SIT, in particular, so the efficiency of this technique is at a large scale. So you really need to consider all the actors of the territory and integrate it in a complete strategy. Included prophylaxis, which means having your growers involved in the strategy. And it's a progressive deployment, as I've shown. So you won't be able to target all France in one go. It has to be progressive. It's an inundative release of insects. So you need the mass rearing factory. You also need to communicate about that because the public, stakeholders could see the massive releases of insects. So they need to understand what's being released, that there's no harm for them. And also there are regulatory considerations, of course, to have. And another point to keep in mind, we talk about weekly or bi-weekly releases. So there's a whole logistics system to have. We have to release on the field live and fitted insects. They have to keep the best quality possible. So there's when there's no SIT in place in the country, there's a whole new system to develop, which can rely on existing actors that already have distribution networks. So these are all part of the business model to build. Quality control, as for every tools, but what's especially important with SIT is the timely feedback from the field. So you not only release the insects, but you need to measure the efficacy on the field weekly, or have a feedback from what's going on in the field so that you can also readjust your releases. So it's not only a product, it's really a full service involving different actors. So just quickly, so I used to work on SIT as a research for over 13 years, mainly on mosquitoes, and now I'm starting a company in France to develop that. And so I'm also in the process of developing the most optimal business model for this company. And so just as some initial thoughts to share from my perspective, for the business model, the most important resources that we need at the beginning to really get the company started is what's the need? Of course, when we talk about mosquito, there's a huge need that is more and more obvious with the climate change to people, especially in south of France. Mosquito is already here, is already biting us. The disease transmission is increasing. So there's a need that all stakeholders are really seeing. The challenge, though, is upscaling the technology. So we have processes that work. There's been the proof of concept in the field on a small scale. And now for SIT to become a company, you need to upscale that. So industrialization of the process is the key factor. Financial support. We talk about industry, so it's not a small budget. And so we have the chance, I think, in France to have lots of support for green techs and innovative companies. And also the consideration that we have is that this technique has so many impacts, positive impacts on the environment, on the society. So it really lies in the social economy field. So that's also one of the challenge we want is how to develop that company as a social enterprise. And what we are already starting to do is developing community engagement, communications to raise awareness and to understand how people are viewing, how the different stakeholders are viewing this. And finally, the regulation. So in France, there's a regulatory framework that works at an experimental level. Now, for a commercial activity, it's too constrained, too it's not adapted. So there's a need also to make this regulation evolve with the authorities. But there's a lot of very interesting opportunities ahead for the development of such a company. And the position that we want for this company is to be a technological partner within the whole ecosystem and work closely with the local technical and commercial partners that are already existing. Basically, we provide a new solution that is lacking. And there's lots of opportunities to expand on other territories in France and to develop in agriculture. So starting with mosquito is the first step to be able to also bring SIT in agriculture in France at an operational level, or hopefully generate more initiatives similar to that. And so that's sharing my perspectives on this. And so the three speakers we'll have the pleasure to hear this afternoon will show three different case studies. So we will start with Canada, where Luc and Jocelyn will present the La Mouche Rose. So it's a company that was recently created to develop onion fly SIT. Then Martin will present the case study of Entomon in South Africa. So that was also an initiative started from the Grower Association and to control codling moth. Unfortunately, this is our failure case study, because we were thinking maybe we miss a failure case among all those success cases. And Martin will have a very interesting analysis of the business model failure parameters. And finally, we'll hear Jair from Moscamed Brazil. So Moscamed is a non-profit social organization that's providing SIT against medfly on a large scale, and now also starting to develop it against mosquito. So I don't know if you have a few questions for me before we continue.
Thanks, Clélia, for your presentation. Just a quick question, because I knew you in the farming domain. So I wonder something about if how come it is more susceptible to develop a company around health issues than on agricultural issues, and because you decided to go for that. So I think that maybe there are more room for this application, or if you can just...
Well, I think that both are equally viable. It was more a choice because I come from mosquito SIT, and that's really my background. There was also the perfect timing to develop that against mosquito in France because of the big issue that it represents, the proof of concept that has been recently made. And for agriculture, there would be room to develop it, copying what's being done on other species and already operational. There's room also to integrate new development on new species.
Thank you. Clélia, what would be the main bottleneck? Because now you're an entrepreneur, and what will be now your main challenge for the future?
So the main challenge is for us, the company, is to be able to industrialize fast and have a mass rearing factory in the next few years, so that we can really be operational and deploy on the territory, and then may expand on other. So it's really the upscaling challenge, and that's not a bottleneck, but that could also, I mean, we have to be careful about how the regulation can involve and potentially slow down the development.
But are you working alone regarding the regulation, or is there another partners?
Well, we're working with the national authorities that are handling that. And then they also want SIT to be available in France, so they, I mean, that shouldn't be a bottleneck, but that's something to be careful with.
Last question by Felix. Then we have a couple of questions also from the chat, but I will give you the computer, and you will be able to answer.
Okay, you pointed out that one of the big advantages of SIT is that there's less of an issue with resistance. I seem to remember that there are examples where Medfly developed a behavioral resistance against SIT. And is there a way of avoiding that happening?
But it's, I don't know if we call that resistance, it's more the problem comes from the mass rearing of a colony that gets different habits that are maybe not compatible with the wild. So when that happened, they had to refresh the colony, and so where we have to be really particularly careful is on the mass rearing, not to, I mean, to really understand the behavior and the mating behavior, of course, of the wild insects, and to be sure that for medflies that have a tendency to mate only over a few hours at a certain time of a day, if your males from the rearing have been used to a different time of the day. That's what's creating the incompatibility, more than, it's not the females that detect that, oh, this is a sterile male, so I'm not mating. But that's, so it's mostly the behavior change, and then the big question, research question is, when there's multiple mating, can they be more, is the female mated by a sterile male, does she tend to mate more to mate more, because the sterile males wouldn't trigger the right response, physiological response.
Thank you so much, Clélia.